Today we're looking at another future deck and another deck preview, this time for Secret Investigators. Now, Secret Investigators is kind of the sub-archetype, which is just light reptiles, but their most impressive boss monster, ironically, is not actually Secret Investigator at all. It is this one, Snake Princess of Purity. The Snake Princess of Purity is a very interesting card. It has 2500 attack first off, which is fantastic. Great number, we always want to hit that. We can send the top card of our deck to the graveyard, and one face-up monster on your opponent's field loses attack equal to the number of face-up light attribute monsters on your field times 600 until the end of this turn. Then if you have 3 face-up monsters, so it can be any type, any attribute, draw 1 card. So at the very least, this card can reduce the attack of one of your opponent's monsters by 600 by milling a card. That's already a good effect. Being able to potentially get rid of 1800 attack and drawing a card is fantastic, which makes this boss monster just really, really good. It's not like unfair good, but it's really, really strong. It's good into, like, let's say maximums, because you can reduce their attack by 1800, which is a significant amount. It's good into just about everything, because again, reducing attack is really good. The only maybe small negative is to get all of that attack reduction if you're running a lot of light, but this deck specifically, we are running a bit more of a variety, but still primarily light. So the other boss monster we've chosen to run is Ecdysis Caliglion, and the reason we've gone with this is because it is probably just the best generically good reptile monster there is. Just as soon as we get 5 cards in the graveyard, this thing's 25. Any more than that, and it's even bigger. And anything bigger than 25 is absolutely fantastic. If we can get 10 engraved, this card becomes 1000, which is fantastic. Massive weakness with the card, though, is its defense is only 0. So when it gets changed to defense, it is a sitting duck. Other than that, really, really strong card. As long as we're milling, which again, reptiles like to mill, we'll be really good with that. For our legend monster, we've gone with Ryza. Ryza is probably the strongest legend monster in the game at the moment. Being able to put a card to the top of your opponent's deck can be really, really powerful, as sometimes it kind of sets them back a little bit, especially if you can send a tribute monster back to the top of their deck. It can deal with front row and back row, which makes it really, really versatile. 2400 attack is also fantastic. The only small problem this card has is it's level 6, so it gets killed by Aquila quite easily. The next monster we're playing, Clawleon. So, Clawleon is very important for this deck. Clawleon's effect basically says if your opponent has a face-down monster on their field, send the top 2 cards of your deck to the graveyard, choose one face-up level 7 or higher reptile monster on your field. If it attacks defense position monster, it inflicts piercing battle damage. Now that is extremely important because neither of our boss monsters have the capability on their own to inflict piercing, to get double attack, or to destroy our opponent's defense position monsters, which means if our opponent is just able to set 3 every turn, we don't really have a good way to get to their life points. That's where Clawleon comes in. It lets us mill, which is fantastic. We always want to be milling, as well as giving our monsters piercing. The only small setback with Clawleon, well, I suppose it kind of has 2, is one, it's Earth, which means it will give us less of a bonus when we're using Snake Princess of Purity's effect. Also, your opponent has to have a face-down defense. So if your opponent manages to get a face-up defense monster by whatever means, we won't be able to get piercing. Obviously, that shouldn't come up too often, but it does come up a little bit, and that's just something to take note of. Next up, Legend Magician. So this card is in here for a couple of reasons. First off, excavating the top 3 cards of your deck, sending 1 monster to the graveyard is a really good effect. It's just, in general, a lot of decks want to be milling. This deck is no real exception. Obviously, we want to get Ecdysis Caliglion, and we do have ways to recycle our boss monsters, so we want them in the graveyard also. But we also have the new generic spell card, which is very powerful, Legend Strike, so which we can pay 300 life points. Special summon 1 level 4 monster with 1600 or less attack, or 1 Legend Normal monster from your graveyard face up to your field. Then if you special summon Legend Magician or a Legend Normal monster with this effect, you can destroy 1 spell trap on your opponent's field. So again, we can bring back Legend Magician and pop a spell trap, which can be really, really good, because again, this deck doesn't have any kind of good in-archetype spell trap destruction other than its generic spell trap destruction in Spire Observation. So because of that, we want additional ways to pop the back row. But this card is very versatile as well because it can summon any level 4 monster, which means we can use it to bring back Barrier Statue and Clawleon, which again can be very important. If our opponent is in a situation where they're able to just keep playing defense, we need a way to get Clawleon back, which can be really, really good. And Barrier Statue, again, in a lot of matchups is pivotal. This card can be really, really important to stop yourself getting blown out by Cyber Dragons, by Seven's Wonder Fusion, by a maximum, so really, really good. The only drawback with playing Legend Strike in this deck is that we are playing a lot of level 3 monsters, which won't be particularly useful. But Legend Strike I kind of look at as an extra summon, because as long as you have a level 4 in Graveyard, it's basically just a body. You can use it, bring back a Legend Magician, fire for its effect, and then tribute it off for Ecdysis Caligulaon, or Snake Princess of Purity, or Rise of the Storm Monarch. So there is a lot you can do with this card, and that's why I think this card will probably be at least a soft staple going forward. I don't think every deck will use it, but I think a lot of decks will be using this card. So going into our new monsters, we have Secret Investigator Mistake. Now this card is fantastic. 1300 attack, great. Light Reptile, fantastic. Level 3, again, we'd like this to be level 4 ideally, but level 3 is fine. That's kind of the Reptiles thing. They all like 3s. Anyway, during your main phase, this card was normal or special summoned. Excavate the top 3 cards of your deck. You can add 1 excavated level 3 or higher reptile monster to your hand. Place the remaining cards on top of your deck in any order. Now, this card is really, really cool. First off, it lets you just plus for nothing. You just gain an extra card, which is really, really good. Second, it's 3 or higher, which is every reptile in the deck, including our boss monsters, which makes it really good for digging. Third, we get to place the other cards on top of our deck in any order, which means if we have 2 mistakes, we could basically say, oh, there's 2 cards I want in the top 3, I can put it back and then get it again with mistake. Or if we have a second mistake but do not want it, or if we want to mill a card that is not one of the top cards of our deck, we can use something like Legend Magician to shuffle our deck, therefore changing the odds of what we're going to get, which is really, really good. And if you have small little combos like that, you can really kind of set your deck up in a way, or try and push the odds in your favor to get a more favorable outcome. So Mistake, I think, is really, really good. And I think it's a card that some people underestimate, but really is the star of the deck. Next up, Secret Investigator Mismatch. So if your opponent has a face-up level 7 or higher monster on their field, send 1 level 3 or lower reptile monster from your hand to the graveyard. Special summon 1 level 7 reptile monster from your graveyard to your field and face-up attack position. So really, really cool. So we have to send level 3 or lower reptile monster from our hand to the graveyard. That's fine. We have a lot of those. We have a total of 12 in the deck. We can special summon a level 7 reptile monster from our graveyard to our field. Now, it doesn't have to be a light monster, but Ecdysis Caligulaon is level 8, so we cannot bring that back, which means we are still limiting ourselves to Snake Princess of Purity. Now, there is another boss monster in the deck that we also could bring back with this, that being the Elite Secret Investigator Mystery, but we'll talk about this card a little bit later, but I did not think this card was worth including. Maybe as a one-of, you could get away with it. So next up, Secret Investigator Mislead. So if you have another face-up reptile type monster on your field, pay 300 life points. Change 1 face-down defense position monster on either side of the field to face-up attack position. Then this card loses 1300 attack. So this is another way to get to your opponent's life points. We can change their defense position monsters to attack position and then attack over them in exchange for all of this card's attack points. So what you'll typically be doing is changing a monster to attack mode and then tributing this off for one of our boss monsters, and then potentially even weakening it again using Snake Princess of Purity. But again, this does have a slight downside in that it only changes face-down defense position. So just like Clawleon cannot gain piercing if your opponent doesn't have face-down monsters, this also cannot change a face-up defense monster to face-up attack position, which can create some issues occasionally. It does come up and it does get annoying, but other than that, this card is pretty decent. Finally, for the monsters, we have Secret Investigator Miscast. If you have no other monsters on your field, you can pay 300 life points, send the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard. Then if a reptile type monster is among the cards sent, you can add a light attribute reptile type monster from your graveyard to your hand. So again, this card is really good because all you have to do is mill any reptile. It doesn't have to be light, but the card you take back does have to be light, which means it plays very nice with all these other non-light reptiles, which we always like to see. And we can use this ideally to dig for a Purity and then tribute it for Purity, because obviously we don't want to be ending our turn with 300 attack monsters. So again, really, really useful card, and it really brings the whole deck together. Next up, we have Spy Observation, which can pop a spell trap. Again, really, really good. And we can excavate the top card of our deck and put it on the top or bottom, which means, again, we can use this to try and set up for Mistake or Legend Magician. So there is a lot of things we can do with this card other than just popping spell traps. Dark Hole, again, the best Legend spell in the game. Fantastic, out so much stuff, and can just win games on its own. So really, really good in here. I don't think we necessarily need Graceful Charity in here. I think this deck is relatively consistent on its own, but Dark Hole, again, can just win games. Next up, Pot of Arrogance. We are playing a lot of trap cards, so we've decided to go Arrogance, and this is also because we don't really have a single theme. We're not just playing 7s, we're not just playing 8s, we're not just playing 6, so none of the other draw spells really work in here. Pot of Arrogance, on the other hand, is really, really good. Just draw 2 cards, can't use any other spell cards. That restriction can get annoying, but more often than not, we'd rather have this than not. So for our traps, Nobody Scat Thief. Again, probably the best generic trap in the game. Really, really powerful. Lets us fix our hand, lets us blank damage from level 8 or lower monsters, lets us get rid of the top cards of our deck if they suck. Basically, just really fantastic card. I think most decks will probably be playing this at 1 all the time now. It's just really, really good. Some decks will even go up to 2. Next up are in archetype trap cards, Secret File 33, Noble Death of Resentment. So when an opponent's monster declares an attack, shuffle 3 level 3 or higher reptile monsters from our graveyard into the deck. The attacking monster loses 3,000 attack until the end of this turn. 3,000 is insane. That will make a maximum monster, for example, drop to 1,000 attack usually. That will make a big boss monster become a piddly monster. A lot of the time, this will just read your opponent's monster's attack becomes 0. Some cases it won't, such as 7's Rogue Magician, again like maximums. But a lot of the time, this card just reads you win combat. Really, really powerful. The only downside is we have to shuffle monsters from our graveyard back into the deck. And it is a battle trap, and we're running it at 3. So if our opponent has any way to turn off battle traps, Mirage Dragon, Sea Serpent Maximum, for example, then it'll turn this off. As well as, because we're running multiple copies, if our opponent's playing Sea Dragon Knight, they will also be able to pop it, which does kind of suck, but it is such a good combat trap, and we want to be playing some traps anyway because we're on Pot of Arrogance, that it was worth including. Again, a lot of the time, this card can win the game. And then finally, Magic Cylinder. Who would have thought? Magic Cylinder, the best legend trap in the game. It's always going to be a blowout. This card is just fantastic. Again, occasionally we'll be like siding it out for something, but Magic Cylinder is really, really strong. Extra deck does not matter. We just want to have 15 cards in here to throw our opponent off, so on turn 1 they do not know what we're playing. So as you probably noticed, this side deck isn't really indicative of what we're actually playing. This is just kind of some stuff that we've just thrown in to test with. So Elite Secret Investigator Mystery is the other boss monster that we've chosen to not include. So it's a level 7 monster with 2300 attack. Already 2300 is a bit of a red flag. We do not like those weaker monsters. But we can shuffle 2 other face-up reptile type monsters from our field and 1 card from your hand. So you're minusing 3, and you've got to specifically have 2 other reptile monsters. So already that's a bit wonky. This card gains 300 attack. Okay, 26 good. Then you can special summon up to 2 level 7 or higher reptiles from your hand and or graveyard face up to your field. So again, can be really good. If you're summoning from the hand, you're unbricking yourself. If you're summoning from the graveyard, you're just gaining an extra load of advantage. Can be fantastic, but it has very heavy cost. You need to be set up to do this. If you draw this card early, it's doing next to nothing. Obviously, you could put it into the graveyard and then try and get it back with something like Secret Investigator Mismatch, which is fine, but I do feel that this card is a little bit unreliable, and that's why I personally don't really like using it. If I was going to play this, like I said before, I'd maybe play this at 1 copy, and I wouldn't be relying on it. It's more of a Hail Mary, maybe we can just pull this off at the end and win. I've been finding that when I was running this card, it was doing not very much for me, and when I've taken it out, the deck seemed a lot more consistent. So yeah, that is the deck. It's very fun. That is my first takeaway. Some of these cards feel very, very good to use, but it does have some drawbacks. It never boosts itself to ridiculous attack. It's never doing anything super unfair. We don't have any ways to pop monsters. The ways to get damage into our opponent is going to be piercing, but again, Clawleon can be a little bit unreliable, so can Secret Investigator Mislead by changing monsters from defense to attack. So it's a little bit unreliable is how I would describe this deck, but I still think this deck could perform quite well. Again, the cards feel very good. They feel very smooth, just unreliable. I think that's the best way to describe it. So let's fire in some replays and I can show you a little bit about what I've been talking about